scooping them up with the shovel.
Hey, what's shaking? Debris falling from oyster shells.
So all the sand and dust and debris falls off, and then we just dump it in.
It's that time of year again. Oyster shell shaking is back at the Maryland Oyster Restoration Center in Shadyside.
A lot of this debris, little tiny flakes of shell, is what we're trying to get off.
Chesapeake Bay Foundation's Dan Johannes helps to run the center, with volunteers coming in from about April through August to help clean off the shells, an important step for growing oysters.
The oyster larvae is so tiny and microscopic, it needs to have a clean surface to settle onto. So without that clean surface, the shell will not be able to set.
1,200 bushels of shells a year are coming from restaurants. When some of them shut down through the pandemic last year, the piles stopped growing.
We shut down collecting for the pandemic for about 2 months, so we weren't collecting any. But then we got permission to go out to our public drop-off sites, which we started to see an increase in shell collection from our public drop-off sites because more people were buying shell from the aquacultures directly.
Johannes says CBF is all caught up, but the Oyster Recovery Partnership, which also collects recycled shells from restaurants, may continue to notice the impact.
Compared to 2019, we had a 56% drop in our shell volume in 2020, directly related to the pandemic.
ORP stockpiles shells so they won't notice the decline this year, but it could show up in the coming years. Executive Director Ward Slacum says it's motivation to keep slurping.
The process of removing oysters and their tissue from the bay and consuming it will also remove nutrients from the bay. We know that the bay has got a problem with excess nutrients, and so that really helps us create a healthier bay.
Back to shell shaking, where on this day, volunteers with Maryland-based cybersecurity company Dragos are turning their protection skills to the bay, a lesson for some out-of-towners.
I'm from Philadelphia. Just understanding, what oysters do to actually filter and clean the water is interesting. Kind of motivates you to get this done and feel good about what you're doing.
Really, I didn't understand the whole process. One, that they were depleting from the bay, and then what he explained to us is how they do the farming. Like, they'll attach to anything. He said, there could be 100,000 of them on this shell.
After they get a shakedown, the shells end up here in setting tanks where the larvae is introduced.
We'll leave it set for about 3 days. Then after 3 days, the tank will become crystal clear. So the larvae are feeding on the water.
And then they will be dropped down into oyster sanctuaries to help clean the bay.
I think the oysters are super important. I love the fact that they help purify, and I like that it's some hard work. It makes you feel good afterwards. Manual labor is always kind of refreshing and rewarding.
A good way to shake up the workday. For Chesapeake Bay Media's Bay Bulletin, I'm Cheryl Costello.